So this is where catastrophic disclosure to me is. Catastrophic disclosure is a false disclosure. It's done in bits and pieces, but in a manipulated way. This would be the ultimate fear play, a big old fear play. And that's how you colonize people's minds, and that's how you end up in a catastrophic disclosure.
It's either Russian, Chinese, or ours. And it's not ours. We've already said it's not ours. We don't have that capability. And we damn sure hope it's not Russian or Chinese, because then we're really screwed.
Totally a lie. Now, why would that lie be so valuable? Think about this, everybody, for a minute. Why would something that has already been proven, if you go to the Disclosure Project Intelligence Archive, dpiarchive.com, you'll see, 120 plus crash retrievals, but you'll also see witnesses, military and corporate witnesses to these man-made UFOs. And so much so that people, like the recent whistleblower, 𝗍𝗱𝗯, has said repeatedly to us, they are indistinguishable from the actual NHI craft or ET craft. The technology is that advanced. In what Lockheed, Skunk Works, Northrop Grumman, Raytheon, and a few other big contractors have that build these things. We also know they're being built apparently in Russia and most likely China by the same consortium, by the way. This is a global consortium criminal enterprise. So I think that the catastrophic disclosure is that hiding that keeps the technologies that would benefit the Earth away, because they say, well, we don't know how they operate. We don't know what zero-point energy is. Nothing like that's ever been built. Total fabricated, bold-faced lies. That leaves us dependent as a civilization on an 1800s energy paradigm for our energy system, which not only it requires most of the population of the world to be impoverished to some degree, but also under control of a centralized system. So it's actually a type of, I call it petro-slavery, where the whole planet is dependent on the fossil fuel and the centralized power grid to have their very existence, to even live as we live as a modern society. That would all change if these technologies came out. It would be the ultimate liberation of all people in all strata of societies, both in the United States and the developed countries and the so-called first world, but in the developing world even more so. But all of us would be liberated. So who is that catastrophic for? Not the 99.99% of the population that are not attached to the conventional energy generating system. Okay, on planet Earth, 8 billion people. Go look at how many people are directly attached to that industry. Now, it's a very profitable one. It has hundreds of trillions of dollars in assets and commodities that are traded in financial markets. Chicago Board of Trade and others commodity, that's hundreds of trillions of dollars a year right there in trading, generating commissions. So there's a whole financial issue here. But in terms of looking at the long-term fortunes of humanity, withholding this information and saying that we don't have these technologies is itself a type of continuation of human global enslavement to the current system. Now, let's then add in one other thing. They have portfolios that I know for a fact, they go in and show people in national security circles. Let's say that you're the president or your Senate Intelligence Committee, and there are folks who will come in with a portfolio showing very gruesome, alleged NHI craft or NHI beings doing things to humans, abductions, mutilations, blowing up villages, vivisections, cutting people open alive, feeding babies to spider-like aliens, right out of a horror movie. Now, aside from the fact a lot of it's made up out of whole cloth, the parts that are real, and there are real victims of abductions. I was almost abducted in 1994. Those are being done by humans masquerading as aliens. But they're also using these technologies to do it. They're using craft that look like an alien ship. They're using technologies that are very advanced electronics, like supercharged Havana syndrome type energy weapons that affect awareness and consciousness and all sorts of things. So those are being used by people who are masquerading as aliens and then convincing officials that there's this threat. But that falls apart if there's an honest disclosure. And that is that there are three things going on. There's the extraterrestrial vehicles and people. There's the man-made craft and man-made alien phenomenon. And then there's the extra-dimensional or interdimensional beings that they deliberately mix up with both the extraterrestrial and the man-made. Some of the extra-dimensional entities are actually able to be brought into this dimension through very advanced electromagnetic systems. And I know physicists and engineers who have done this. It sounds like something out of Stranger Things because it is like that. That's where they got the idea from the movie, the whole Montauk experiments and all that on Long Island, back on the eastern part of the far eastern edge of Long Island. So when you begin to analyze this, the denial that we have these technologies opens up only one conclusion for all this other phenomenon. It's all got to be non-human. It's all got to be done by the aliens. So by denying that we have these technologies, we have these craft, it sets everyone up for coming to one logical conclusion. People have been abducted. There have been mutilations of cattle. All of that, therefore, goes through that open door, even though it's a completely false narrative. That's why repeatedly these counterintelligence officials go around and say, we don't have anything like this. There's no way. Because as soon as they acknowledge we do, it's not hard to then make the connection from the whistleblowers we have to say, oh, well, these have been used in these counterintelligence operations, psychological warfare, psyops. And that's then, of course, inescapable that people realize, well, gee, what part of this is actually non-human intelligence or extraterrestrial? And what part of it has been masquerading? No one's asking that question. And most people in Congress and in the bureaucracy or White House and national security don't know enough about the issue yet to come to that kind of assessment, which is why it's so important that we keep putting this information in front of them. But every time that happens, you have people rush in and say, oh, we couldn't possibly have something like that. And by the way, those people are not an emergency doctor like me. Those are people who have great credentials from the military industrial complex or the intelligence community. And so they're going to say, no, I mean, this, we know what this is. I was read into it. We don't have anything like this. So that is a very dangerous game being played. And that is how we have catastrophic disclosure. This information comes out, but it's all portrayed as this one thing, non-human, as a catch-all. And that the staged and faked alien terrifying events all fall under that one category falsely. That then leads to an inescapable policy decision by the Congress and the White House. And that is, we have to, and other leaders around the world, we have to unite the world to fight the aliens. We have to have this sort of dystopian of a future where it's us against them. This sort of, crazy narrative of endless war that expands to not just humans fighting each other, whether it be, Russia and Ukraine or whatever it is, but that we then unite everyone against some external alien threat. And this is exactly what Wernher von Braun talked about on his deathbed, and others have warned me about, and that they have the ability to stage it. So catastrophic disclosure is actually attaching very high value targets, let's call them HVTs, in terms of whistleblowers. And they come out, they provide the information, and eventually, I think in the next year or so, all the proof that we're not alone and we have these craft that are non-human. But then they are attached to people who give this false narrative, who repeatedly go up on Capitol Hill and gaslight House Oversight Committee members or Senate Intelligence and say, yeah, but none of those are ours. Or maybe there's some from China, right? So, which is a ruse used by many people I've talked to. Well, I can't talk about what we have, but we know some other country has it, right? So if they talk about another country, it's fair game. If they talk about the United States, they're violating what they consider their non-disclosure agreement, or the agreement they made to basically gaslight the public and deceive officials and deceive the media, etc. So I think that is how we end up in a catastrophe. Catastrophic disclosure is not the information and the evidence coming out. That's what everyone, I think, is quite ready for. But a lot of these whistleblowers get convinced, slow this down. Why? So that this consolidation around a false narrative, a false flag operation can happen. That is catastrophic, because now that leads to what? It leads to the world having not unity in peace or unity in something beautiful, a new vision of us and other civilizations in the universe doing things together, or a new world being created technologically that's sustainable and peaceful. It's uniting the world under a militaristic sort of global totalitarian system where everyone is terrified of the what's out there in space, and that's how they give up their freedoms. You know, as Benjamin Franklin said, those who would give up their liberty for security shall have neither. And that is one of the real problems with this. The people who would like to control the populace through fear, which is the way that demagogues have done this for millennia, whether it be religious leaders or political leaders, military leaders, dictators, this would be the ultimate fear play, you know, a big old fear play. And that's how you colonize people's minds, and that's how you end up in a catastrophic disclosure. So my concern is not there would be too much information and evidence disclosed. It's that there's not enough of it in the right context, and that the delay that we see happening, and this has been going on for the 35 years I've been doing this. Let's not forget, the Clinton administration was very close to disclosing all of this. They did form a team, an operation called Team Red, penetrate those programs and get them under control. And that Team Red was completely decimated, either killed or absorbed into the illegal black projects. And I think this is something we have to be very careful of here, because we're at a point where I believe everything is poised to come out. There's growing bipartisan support in Congress for this, as you saw yesterday in the press conference with Congresswoman Luna, who I have personally briefed on this issue, and others who were there, like Mr. 𝗱𝗱𝗰𝗶, people like Mr. 𝗍𝗁, who is on the task force originally, who I've discussed this with. I think there is strong bipartisan support to get to the bottom of this. The problem is they're being advised very badly by people who swoop in and create these false narratives of threat and false narratives of we don't have anything like this. Now, there are people who've evolved on this quite a bit. For example, there was the 𝗍𝗿𝗱𝗰𝗿, who was the F-18 Hornet pilot, who chased the UFO and got the footage and all of that. You all know what that is, and we can show it. But when I first spoke to him a few years ago, he was adamant that what he had pursued absolutely had to be alien, that there's no way any human on Earth had any technology like that. And this would be a very rational assumption for someone having their first encounter with a propulsion and energy system like what Lockheed Skunk Works has, or Northrop Grumman has, or Raytheon has, because they do not move in an aerodynamic form. There's no rockets, there's no jets, the infrared sensors that would pick up a heat signature, nothing. So what is making this thing move like that, right? And so it's a normal assumption for a conventional military or civilian pilot, or a rocket scientist, for example, dealing with normal propulsion, to say, well, that has to be from outer space or another non-human civilization. And that is where you make your big mistake. Now, 𝗍𝗿𝗱𝗰𝗿 has looked into this and has had, I said years ago to him, that was from the Lockheed Skunk Works. He has since admitted that someone from Lockheed has confirmed to him directly that that was one of theirs. So that is very good evolution, but it takes a while. The problem is, I don't know if we have time for people to spend 2, 3, 4, 5 years wrapping their minds around this, because I think we're on a fast track where all this is going to come out. And if our president and our national security team and our Congress, as well as leaders around the world, really think that all of this phenomenon has to be alien or non-human, then that opens the door for exactly what that 70-year evil agenda has been. And that is to have a threat that the whole of humanity faces. So this is where catastrophic disclosure to me is. Catastrophic disclosure is a false disclosure. It's done in bits and pieces, but in a manipulated way, in a very carefully orchestrated way that ends up, in my opinion, driving policy in the 180-degree opposite direction it needs to go in. But without enough information and without enough disclosure of the facts, this is where you could come to that conclusion, just like 𝗍𝗱𝗰𝗴, it was an error, but it was a rational conclusion he, as a jet pilot for the military, made. It was a totally rational conclusion. Now, on the bright end of this, and the good side of it, is that, and I want to say this, it's a completely nonpartisan person, and it's a completely independent person, because I deal with people all over the world. This issue absolutely has to transcend the sort of ridiculousness of partisan politics. But there was a woman who was recently, I think today or last night, confirmed as Director of National Intelligence, 𝗱𝗫𝗄, who I think will be very friendly to this. And someone that I've known for a while, who's a friend of hers, is Amaryllis Kennedy, who is RFK Jr.'s son's wife. So RFK Jr. is the father-in-law for Amaryllis Kennedy. And Amaryllis Kennedy was a CIA undercover officer for, 6 or 8 years. She very much is aware of this subject. She's very supportive of real disclosure. She's aware of the fact that JFK and most likely Bobby Kennedy Sr. were killed over this issue, and that there's a lot of work to be done. So, and you can put up on the screen, the president has announced from the White House, an intelligence advisory group or board that Amaryllis Kennedy is on, as is Congressman Noon and others, Nunes. So what I see happening is that it's going to be sort of well, I won't say who said this to me, but someone very senior in the administration said this is going to be a knife fight, because over, does this come out? How does it come out? How much of it comes out? Now, on the bright end of it, I'm also hearing from people at a very senior level in the intelligence community that they're speaking of it the way we've always spoken of it, that it has to come out, but that not all the technologies come out all at once. Because I have said, if you look into our archive, what was said to President Clinton and his team 30 years ago in 94, 5, 6, was exactly what I'm saying now, is that the things that are flying around that are man-made UFOs, electrogravitic propulsion systems, electromagnetic field propulsion, those really can't come out, because they're going to be figured out to be a missile delivery system. And the Earth right now is an armed camp of a bunch of tribes, call them nation states or religious entities or whatever it is, but a group of tribes that are, blowing each other up over whatever reason they can find. This is the human crisis, actually, because that consciousness still exists of violence and division, but we have more and more sophisticated weaponry, up to and including thermonuclear weapons. But now you add that into the mix. So that has to be not brought out yet. But the energy generation systems that would give us free energy for our homes, our cars, our factories, our businesses, that would grow the global economy. And one of the arguments to be made to the powerhouse military intelligence mainstream people here in the United States, as well as Congress and the president, is that would be a tide that would lift all ship, but it could be led by the United States. What I'm hearing is that if we don't do it, there are some big countries prepared to do it ahead of us. So even from, yes, that is imminent. I've heard that from very senior people in the intelligence community. That's all I'll say. And so do we really want to be left behind? I mean, this would be an argument for the current president and Congress. You know, you talk about being left in the dust. You know, the most important technological advances in human history since the dawn of known human history come out, and we're there still fiddling while Rome burns, right? And some other countries come out and say, see ya, wouldn't want to be ya, you know, and this is not what you want to do. So I always tell these people who brag about their America First agenda, I said, well, I got news for you. You're about to be left in the dust real fast on this, because it's a big world, and it's naive to think that other big powers around the world, whether it be China, Russia, whatever, have not studied this issue, they've had their own crash retrieval efforts. They've figured out how these technologies work. And the global organization that's been keeping this secret is fracturing, right? And so I'm just telling you this for a fact. So the question then becomes, is the entity known as the United States of America, right? That constitutional entity, it going to be relevant, or will it just simply be made irrelevant? And so that's why I think that the time is of the essence here, but we got to get it right. And what I've said to several senior people in the administration and in Congress recently is that if we get this wrong, if you think the mess of COVID and the global shutdown or other problems we've had, 9/11, for example, and what happened as a consequence of that, 20 years of war that was a disaster, trillions of dollars lost, God knows how many people killed, American and people in other countries. And all it did was destabilize the world, destabilize everything further. This would be way worse. That is catastrophic disclosure, my friends, not having the information come out in a timely manner, which would have been at least 50 or 60 years ago.
If you like this video and you want to see more amazing content, go ahead and check out the next video on our channel.